So basically, after spending millions of dollars, our own government have worked out that autistic people not only are disproportionately underemployed, but basically can't keep a job. So I guess the question is, are we all stuffed, Dr. Beth?
A really great question, Orion. Sadly, 1 in 5 autistic Australians has reported that they've lost a job specifically because they're autistic. And in Canada and the UK, over 2/3 of autistic people are unemployed. But I don't think it's a completely hopeless situation. There's a lot of new research happening in this space, so let's talk about some potential solutions.
Ask Dr. Beth, where we bring your real-life questions to an absolute expert in the field of neurodiversity, Dr. Beth Radalski. She is a neurodivergent coach, educator, consultant, and she's autistic. Dr. Beth, welcome back.
I'm so happy to be here.
Hey, I just want to get straight to this because I don't think there's a more important topic right now, frankly, for, late diagnosed and even diagnosed at birth, diagnosed as a child, diagnosed as a teen. For autistic adults, employment is the thing, okay? So before we get to the questions, because we've got some great questions from our community, let's just lean into the fact, you're Dr. Beth for a reason. This is your thing. This is your qualifications and your expertise. So we're going to go back to that thesis of yours, and I want you to just give us the whistle-stop tour. What do we need to know? What are some of the overarching themes we need to know for our discussion on employment today? Things we maybe never thought of before.
Yeah, great question, Orion. So my thesis made some really interesting findings in terms of autistic employment. And I think as an autistic person myself, I was able to ask some questions that maybe hadn't been asked previously in research. So one of the findings we made is that there's actually a neuroarchal social structure in society. In the same way that we have a patriarchy that can exclude women from the workplace, for example, or we have a colonial structure that can include people of color from the workplace, we also have a neuroarchal social structure that's based on a hierarchy of minds. And that social structure privileges neurotypical people, behaviors, cultures, and ways of being. Now, there are 6 structures in this neuroarchy, and 2 of them are directly related to workplaces and professional environments. So as you can see, I've got my t-shirt on to smash the neuroarchy because I think it's time to bring it down and end neurotypical privilege and make sure that autistic people and neurominority groups more broadly can have better employment inclusion outcomes. So a couple of the key concepts that we're going to talk about today are neuroism, which is the belief that the neurotypical neurotype is superior. So it's neurotypical supremacy, if you will. And we're also going to talk about neurophobia, and that is a fear of neurodivergent people. Now, neurophobia can manifest in a couple ways, but the most relevant one in the workplace setting is a fear of incompetence, a fear that you're not going to do it right, a fear that your presence in the workplace is in some way going to create negative consequences for your neurotypical colleagues. This can either look like you messing up, you not doing a project right, you not hitting deadlines, you not having the same skills or qualifications or expertise. Even if they're the same as your peers, you might be seen as less capable in those areas, and you might be excluded from certain opportunities on that basis. And it can also manifest with the view that, we talk about Sanism a little bit too. So neuroism and Sanism can overlap. Sanism being the belief that people who are not neurotypical are dangerous. And so sometimes these beliefs can manifest in the workplace as well.
You've never told me this before, this Sanism thing. Why have I never heard of this before? I'm fascinated now. Sorry. So you're saying there's a thing based around we're feared, we're dangerous. Is that what you... Sorry, you can just back up, please. You've never told me this before. I'm very upset with you, by the way. I'm very upset with you. Just quickly go through this, please, because you know what? This is the same for my kid in school, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. So Sanism emerged from, what was originally disability studies, which emerged kind of in the 1980s. And then we move into, mad pride literature and movement, and some of the academic literature that came out of these spheres talks about Sanism and the belief that people who are not neurocognitively typical can be dangerous. And in social sciences, we talk about this view that, the European subject is this rational, intellectual. These are a lot of the values that underlie patriarchy and coloniality as well, by the way. The idea that there's a particular type of brain that works and operates in the right way and all others are inferior. So to really get into this, you've really triggered the info dump. I hope you're strapped.
That's okay. Good.
We're going to go.
Good.
So, we often talk about neurotypicality as strictly about disability. You're either abled or you're disabled. You're either neurotypical or you're neurodivergent. And yes, there's some truth to that, but it's also deeply intersectional. And what we don't often talk about are the overlaps between neurocognitive privilege and oppression, and not just ableism, but also sexism and racism and classism. And so often when we look back at how the typical brain was thought to exist throughout different points in history, it's not just described as abled versus abled. For example, under patriarchy, women were thought to be hysterical, irrational, too emotional, not capable of controlling their actions. They were infantile. They were immature compared to the male brain that was more sophisticated and rational. You have the same thing in coloniality, where oftentimes Black, Indigenous, and people of color and groups pertaining to those identities were stereotyped as angry and irrational and uncivilized and less in control. And so this all comes back to the idea that there's some sort of delay, right? It's this idea that you're less mature. You're not neurocognitively developed at the same level as the cis, white, heterosexual, European, neurotypical male. And so oftentimes these beliefs can manifest in fear that if you're not logical and rational, you're not in control of your faculties. And that can mean that you are acting, quote unquote, insane. You are more likely to be volatile. You're more likely to potentially to be physically dangerous. So we often see this in police interactions with autistic people, for example. It's this belief, Sanism really boils down to the belief that there is one healthy way for a mind to work, and people whose minds do not work in this way in some way pose a threat to the status quo held by that group that falls into that dominant norm.
Okay, so everything I've learned in criminal law at uni will tell me that if that is the case, then I would never go to jail. I would be put in a psychiatric unit and never be released under the King's care. Being autistic.
Well, the criminal side of it's really interesting because Sanism and neuroism also manifest in that courtroom setting. You mentioned crime as a topic, and I think if we look at, Sanism, a perfect example of Sanism and neuroism combining is the way that we conceptualize innocence and honesty. If you think about so suppose you're on a jury, right? And you're a judge and you're watching someone on the witness stand. If they're able to look you in the eye and they're able to sit still and they're able to tell a logical and sequential story from start to finish without any backing up or taking little side quests, you're much more likely to read them as being honest. If they're not able to look you in the eye, if they're fidgeting a little bit, you might interpret that as nervousness. We think that if you can look someone in the eye, you're being honest. If you're not able to look them in the eye, perhaps you're being deceitful. So neurotypical traits are the default standard for honesty, for morality, and this can lead to that sanist and ableist and neuroist view that neurodivergent people are deceitful and dangerous and not otherwise right in a neurocognitive capacity.
And that would be no different in a job interview setting.
Absolutely. Or in the workplace in general, making decisions about teams. A lot of times you see autistic people end up in HR. I often work as a consultant. I've been brought in to support HR and navigating disputes between neurodivergent employees and their organizations. And what you often see is this really subtle underlying belief that the neurodivergent person is manipulating, they're being dishonest. That often tends to be the narrative. And in reality, the neurodivergent person is being very literal and forthcoming, and they're trying to engage. But because they're not engaging performatively with the behaviors we associate with honesty, they're not being read as truthful and honest. And their neurotypical colleagues are often given the benefit of the doubt on that basis, simply because they appear honest, regardless of whether they have the evidence to back up what they're saying.
Yeah. I hate ya. Put that on a t-shirt. Stupid ivory tower. I mean, obviously the employment And autism struggle is real. It's a massive topic. I get so many emails and comments, from the website and YouTube channel. And I really do. It's quite sad. People who are getting letters from employers or facing dismissal, facing different things because they were given a job and then one way or another, the employer has decided that there's just things that they do that they don't like and they just find ways to get rid of them. And it's just, it's overwhelming, but also I feel like, how can this continue to happen? There's really no good level of help out there for these types of people. And I guess the people that are making these letters and disciplining these people don't even understand what they're doing is wrong, potentially illegal. And it's just devastatingly sad. And I just think every day I just hear from more people that are, I feel devastated that their life is never going to be fulfilling because they can't do what they love to do, or they can't keep a job and they just take it on. And so let's start with the questions. The first question is from Kim Gars, and this is: why is there no help or support for autistic adults in the workplace? I've just had to resign from a job I love. Demands exceeded my capacity. So sad. Yeah,
so this is a really important question, and it is really sad what happens to autistic people in workplaces a lot of the time. So often what we see, we talked a little bit about the neuroarchy in the introduction, and I think this is a great place to unpack that a little bit more. So one of the 6 structures of neuroarchy that we found evidence of, and we found this evidence through reviewing hundreds of studies that have been done on autistic experiences in workplaces. We did what we call a discourse analysis. So we looked, how does the public talk about autism employment? How does the public talk about autistic people that may impact how they're perceived and treated in professional spaces? One of the key findings we found is that autistic people are often treated like burdens. So the idea that we're giving you a charitable opportunity by welcoming you onto our team. This is our good act for the day. And we want you to be grateful for being here. And because of that gratitude, we expect you to adapt to our culture. And if you are not a good cultural fit, so if you're not able to thrive within the team culture as it stands now, this is not the job for you. So oftentimes neurodivergent people in these participant studies report feeling like they're a burden, like they're an inconvenience, like they're seen as wanting special treatment. Autistic women report feeling like they're treated like they're divas or high maintenance because there's that gender intersectionality there of women having needs is just too much. So that plays into it in that people are hesitant to disclose and unmask and ask for support because it's perceived as special treatment, not as equity. So I think that's, one of the first major factors that's going on there. But the other thing we found, which really overlaps, is that one of the main structures of neuroarchy is neurotypical relations in paid work. And what this looks like, it takes a few forms. It's the idea that there are certain biological parameters within an autistic person that would make them well or ill-suited to certain forms of work. So segregated work is one key component here. So sometimes what you'll see is neurodivergent hiring programs that are heavily condensed in the tech space. And oftentimes what the research found was that white, male, middle class and above, well-educated technologists tend to be favored in these programs quite a lot of the time. So, flashing back to what we said about the intersectionality of neurocognitive privilege, men have neurocognitive privilege under patriarchy. They're seen as more logical, more rational. White people have neurocognitive privilege under coloniality. They're seen as more logical and rational than people of color. So sometimes you're able to leverage different aspects or pieces of your neurocognitive privilege to navigate neurotypical relations in workplace settings more effectively than groups who have less forms of neurocognitive privilege or who experience more forms of neurocognitive oppression.
Firstly, I think it's really important to understand that you can't discount the importance of the statement that you made, which is, in effect, there is very much a situation most autistic people face, where they're told, I don't think you're cut out for this job, or I don't think you're right for the team, or I don't think you're a good fit. And when I say that, I mean, I seriously hope people watching understand that don't discount that. That is one of the key and most important, turning points in an autistic person's life. Because, well, hang on, you applied for the job, right? You interviewed for the job, you got the job. So I think I am cut out for the job, or you're very bad at picking people, And I think I am a good fit because, again, you interviewed me through the whole process and thought I was a good fit. That's why you gave me the job. So maybe the issue here isn't just me. And I think, to me, this leads into, before we get to another question, this leads into a topic that you just tell me either way from your point of view. Autistic people basically require levels of reasonable adjustment to thrive in their job, and that isn't a privilege or an optional thing. That's something that is the difference between them being good at their job and them not. And the reason why I want you to talk about that is because I hear this all the time, but, well, it's expensive. They're not usually. It's hard. I don't have to do it. I don't want to do it. Or, well, this just makes it harder for me. But I guess the point I'm making is these shouldn't be optional. Like, if you're going to, and then why would I hire autistic people if I've got to give them this? See, this is a key barrier to maintaining employment.
I think one of the best ways I've heard this put is by my good friend Tia Squire. You should follow her on LinkedIn. She's absolutely amazing. She's like 20,000 followers and is just a superstar in the neurodiversity employment space. And Tia said that one of the best ways she'd heard it described as, and I've got my little red flag here to wave. If an employment opportunity tells you you're not a good cultural fit, that's an enormous red flag, because as Tia says, it's not about a fit into the culture. It's a culture add. When you bring a new person into your team, you're adding to your team's culture, and your team culture should be growing around that person. And I think that profoundly changes the way that we think about autism employment, because if we're looking for a cultural fit, again, we talk about the neuroarchy, we're looking for a neurotypical fit because the culture is neurotypical. Sarah Ahmed is an absolute star in this field, talking about how institutions shape themselves and their cultures within the image of the dominant group. So Ahmed says, and this is a quote, "Spaces are lived as being comfortable as they allow bodies to fit in. The surfaces of social space are already impressed upon by the shape of such bodies." So if you think about it, we'll use a metaphor of like a memory foam mattress, right? If you've got a memory foam mattress of your own and you're sleeping on that every night, it is going to be more accustomed to your body. It's going to adapt to your body. You're going to feel comfortable because the mattress is adapting to your shape. So if you're neurotypical in a workplace, the workplace is built around your mold. It's going to be more culturally comfortable for you. If you're autistic and you don't fit into that mold, it's going to be really hard to experience comfort. And comfort isn't just in the literal sense of like, I feel physically comfortable. Comfort in the sense of, can I exist in this space without experiencing profound systemic injustice? And what Ahmed has found is that, workplaces that are built around a dominant norm are not capable of providing that opportunity to groups who have been excluded from the culture. So we're not adding them into our culture and shaping our culture around them. We're saying, come and fit into what's here. And if you don't fit, maybe you're just not the right cultural fit for this workplace. We're totally overlooking the systemic inequality that's creating that mismatch that's not allowing that individual to fit into that workplace.
And distilling that down to a basic human emotion, basically the modern day mainstream workplaces are designed to make an autistic person feel like a failure, to feel like they're not good enough, they're not good at their job. And that's not the truth. Like, you can be told, I don't think you have what it takes. You do have what it takes. You might not be the best. No one is the best. You have to work hard, yeah? But you might not be the best, but you aren't a failure, and you are up for the job, but the way the way the environment's set up makes it hard. But then again, same argument, right? Same argument. The employers, but see, this is why I don't hire autistic people, because I've got to do all this stuff for them to make them, where other people, I give them a job, they just do their job. Like, this is a problem. This is a big issue they face. Like, I can give all the autistic people in the world the advice about talk about some accommodations and try and help you thrive, and they're going to get the same response from most employers, right? It's, well, Jesus, mate. I mean, I hired you to do the job. Can you just do the job? That will always be a barrier.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really interesting the way this can play out through neuroism, because oftentimes when we're gauging who is going to get opportunities in workplaces, it's because success at work is not just about having a job and being present. Success at work is, do you have the opportunity to grow, to develop? Are you able to move upwards if this is part of what you want for yourself? And oftentimes when employers make, this is very strongly evidenced in the research, when employers make decisions about who is going to get those opportunities, not just in the interview room, but who's going to get a promotion, who's going to be tapped as a leader for a given project. Those decisions are often made with unconscious bias. And unconscious bias is when we make decisions that are informed by stereotypes, but we're not aware that we're doing it. So it's those, subtle beliefs. I'm not sure this opportunity is right for this autistic person because maybe they won't want to attend more meetings, so maybe they're not right to be a supervisor. And sometimes, and this is really, really important, people who are attempting to act as allies in this space will often behave in exclusionary ways in the belief that they are helping. I'm preventing you from experiencing suffering because I don't want to ask you for things that you're not capable of. And they assume you're not capable and they don't give you opportunities. And in fact, they're inflicting suffering on you by excluding you, because it's very evident when this is happening. But they think they're helping. So if you're an ally and you're watching this, it's really important. If you're trying to make a decision about how to support a neurodivergent person in the workplace, do not assume. Ask. What do you want for your development in the workplace? Where do you think your strengths lie? How can we align your workflow to align with the strengths that we hired you for? And where are the areas where we can use a team-based approach to offer support where you need it? Everyone has strengths and limitations. And the thing is, we tend to assume the autistic person is the only one with limitations in the workplace that need to be worked around. This is not true. In some cases, for example, often I've seen neurodivergent employees who are excellent project managers, planners. They can think ahead, they can structure, they can anticipate risk, they can anticipate barriers. And sometimes they have that strength in a way that their neurotypical colleagues do not. Not always, but sometimes. And I think it's just important to acknowledge that even neurotypical colleagues will have areas that they're not as strong in, and neurodivergent people may bring strengths as well as limitations. So if we move past that, neoliberal approach of every individual should be able to do everything independently all the time, and we think of the team as an ecosystem, and how can we cater our workflow and our leadership around that ecosystem? What different creatures, if you will, do we have here? What are the supports that we're able to provide? Which environments are they going to thrive in? That's when we start seeing genuinely neuro-inclusive leadership.
It's not my intention to hurt or offend anyone right now, but I really want to share this thought of mine. Allies in the context of autism is the most despicably patronizing thing I've ever heard in my life. It's the idea that somehow I'm at war, I have enemies and allies. I mean, there's people who are kind and compassionate, and there's people who choose not to be kind and compassionate, but both people are able to do both things. So this idea, I'm sorry, I don't want to get triggered. I'm getting triggered, but I'm not trying to upset you. I hope I don't upset you or other people. But if I swear to God, if I hear ally or autistic ally one more time, I honestly, would you like a medal? Like, do you get a war medal for being, I was an autistic ally back in the 20s? Like, is there a march? Do you go, is it, whatever. I'm going on to the next question. I'm sorry. I apologize to everyone.
This is a whole episode, Orion. Like, we need to do a whole episode on allyship, red flags and green flags, I think.
Okay, we will. We can make it the next one. I'm not sure how quick it'll be. We'll try. The least the positive section. I'm sorry. I apologise again. All I'm doing is apologising today. All right, next question. Here we go from Sarah Robertson. All right, Sarah. I'd love to understand better why I leave all my jobs and what I can realistically do about it. This is a great one. The reasons I have for leaving are colleague or manager aggression, boredom, and not enough hours or pay to live even frugally, which, is another thing, right? The disproportionate rates of underemployment, which therefore means, underpay as well. This is a great question.
Yeah, fantastic question. So I think, it's going to be really multifaceted, and it's also going to be unique to the individual in terms of why the jobs are being left. But in terms of the systemic factors that are going to be influencing a lot of people, that neurotypical culture in the workplace is going to be a big one. And this creates kind of a cycle, because what happens is you'll get hired. And oftentimes we have this when we bring in a group that is underrepresented in a workplace, right? We may have a diversity-based hiring initiative, or we may seek to diversify our workforce and bring in a new hire, but then we see them as someone who needs to fit in, not as a cultural add like we just spoke of. And what can happen is this group is then treated differently. So step one, we bring in a new group who's underrepresented in the current workplace. In this case, autistic people. Step two is that the autistic person is treated differently. And this can look like we just talked about. You're getting a different workflow. You're getting excluded from opportunities. You're not getting brought along to meetings because people assume you won't be able to handle the politics of the meeting. There's all sorts of unconscious biases that result in that individual being treated differently. Step three of that cycle is the individual will then start to raise concerns. I'm not being treated like my peers, and I'm feeling uncomfortable with the way that I'm being treated or spoken to. Oftentimes, there's a lot of very direct ableism happening in these cases. I've heard clients sharing all sorts of stories, like just to share some direct quotes, we won't put you on stakeholder management because we know autistic people don't like making phone calls. Things like this, where we assume that we're helping by excluding someone. And I want to be really clear for any allies watching, exclusion is never the answer to inclusion. It seems obvious, and it seems like something we shouldn't have to say, but it's not obvious enough. Exclusion is never the answer to inclusion. You are not including someone by leaving them out on the basis that you don't think they're capable. So often what will happen is the autistic person experiences ableism, team dynamic becomes tense, they raise concerns about this, and then it's flipped back on them. Maybe you misread my tone. Maybe you didn't understand me correctly. Oh, I'm an ally. I would never mean to say anything hurtful to you. And allyship then gets weaponized against a neurodivergent person because neurotypical privilege is believed. And neurotypical people are believed, they're seen as honest, and you're seen as deceitful. This can lead to what we call minority stress. So there's an excellent researcher, Monique Botha, who researches minority stress in autistic people. And minority stress is when a group of people experience disproportionately poor mental and physical health outcomes as a result of the physical and emotional stress they experience because of their social disadvantage. So if you're constantly needing to advocate, disclose, request support, raise discomfort, educate, in the face of ableism, it's exhausting, it's stressful, your nervous system's going haywire because you're needing to sit there with someone senior to you and explain to them, this hurt me and I'm hopeful we can change, but they're the only ones with the power to change it. It's an exhausting process. There's very strong research documenting how this carries out in the workplace. Now, once you start experiencing minority stress, this is pretty much a direct lead-in to burnout. We all know autistic burnout is a terrible thing to experience. We've done an episode on that, Orion. And burnout is when you are exhausted to the point that it is not possible to continue with the skills that you would usually have, and you will start to experience skill loss and a greater need for rest. This makes it very difficult to participate in the workplace. Many people start experiencing more non-speaking episodes, more migraines, more overstimulation, and it's really difficult to participate when you are facing all of those barriers. Masking is another component that leads into burnout, and masking is again linked to that neurotypical workplace culture that you're trying to adapt to. Now, once this cycle plays out, it leads typically to the employee leaving, because changing the system, changing the culture, changing the institution, changing the neuroism and ableism and neurophobia is not a task one person can carry out through advocacy. It requires everyone getting involved, learning, growing. Again, we see the person as an add into the culture and not someone who needs to fit in. That's not a task one person can do alone. They require genuine allies who are willing to, and this is the core of allyship, leverage their privilege and transition it to the oppressed group, so that rather than their privilege being up here and yours being down here, not that they surpass you, but it starts to become at least a little bit more equitable, right? How can I use my position to support this group in advancing their causes that they deem appropriate? When do they need my help? What can I do to help them? And we're just not seeing that a lot of the time. So it's a lot easier for an autistic person to remove themselves from the toxic environment, remove themselves from the environment, creating burnout, and try again somewhere else.
Number one, you're legit just trying to trigger me now with the ally stuff. I know you are. You're taking the piss, and enough is enough. Number two, and this is a genuine and real experience that I get too, is that you said it yourself. You start to feel in the workplace kind of isolated or passively aggressively pushed out, or, you're like, but then if you were able to tell your employer, I feel like I'm being treated differently, and here's some situations, it'll just look like it's all about you, isn't it? Or you're so sensitive. All you care about is that Karen didn't offer you a Tim Tam or something. But of course, the core reasons behind that aren't just that action. They are, how did that happen? Why are these people excluding you or being passively aggressive to you or personally going out of their way to, make sure that you're not included? I mean, that's more, and then that comes down to, well, probably because of the way as an autistic person, I communicate, I read the room, I pick up tones, the way I am as a person is so different for them. They've chosen that to happen. Where, of course, when you bring these issues up, the employer will just say, I mean, come on, mate, like, it's not high school, buddy. You just do your job, and it's almost impossible to navigate that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is where we come back to, oftentimes the neurotypical person will be given the benefit of the doubt because they're performing honesty in a particular way. They fit into the culture. And the other thing that can happen is, we had a great team culture before you got here. So if there are problems and there's tension now, you're the only change, which means you are the problem. And that's not the case at all, because if we're taking that additive approach, if we're adding someone into the culture needs to grow around that person. And if there are problems, that's because there are conflicting cultures coming up against one another. And one of those cultures is dominant and it's prevailing. And when you take the stance, you're not a good cultural fit, you are saying, I am going to maintain the status quo where I am privileged in this workplace because the cultural norms are built around my needs, and it's easiest and most beneficial for me if it stays the same, because I will continue to progress, I will continue to get leadership opportunities, I will continue to grow, and I don't want to have to compete with you for that. So no, I'm not going to change my culture around you. And I think that conflict of interest is not something that is spoken about enough.
100%, yeah. And I look, sometimes I think, what will change, what will happen, and I get sad. I mean, just the sheer amount of work to be done to make it any better is insurmountable. Also, too, I just wonder, what is the point of a HR department with regards to the modern day workplace if there are going to be neurodivergent people, if the entire way of learning HR and building policies is, again, as you would say, through a neurotypical lens? I'm not entirely sure. Like, we can't just add things on and expect it to be okay. I feel like it needs to be completely rewritten. But yeah, I can't see it happening, frankly. I just don't understand, how we're supposed to get this done, even for my kid, right? It's just, yeah, I feel I feel deflated, Beth.
It's a really challenging space, Orion, and I think this is emblematic of what a lot of autistic people experience. And this is really what minority stress is. It's that progressive chipping away over time at your morality, your sense of humanity, your sense of dignity, the microaggressions that are coming your way on a daily basis that just persistently undermine your credibility, your right to be there. And it's very dehumanizing and very exclusionary, and the emotional and psychological toll is well documented in research. So if anyone's out there feeling like that, and you've witnessed these patterns happening in your life, take some solace in knowing that, you know, not that we want to take solace in other people's suffering, but you're not alone in this. And there's very strong research showing this is a typical outcome.
Okay, well, I'll just add that to the emotional and psychological toll of taking my boys on school holidays. You could add that as well. There's a lot to balance. But seriously, Beth, what we're going to talk about now with the next question is one of the key things, really, reasonable adjustments. So, and this is, people don't often realize this. In the school setting or in the workplace setting, there are things that are actually enshrined in law with regards to disability, discrimination, human rights, these kind of things, and the things that are not. Now, most parents don't realise that an individual learning plan is actually completely optional. No one has any legal requirement to do that for your child. But here's the thing. Here's what the school never asks you to help make, and here's what's actually legally required, and that's a behavioural support plan with actually enshrined reasonable adjustments that are not only run by you and you have time to talk to them on a regular basis, but then they are amended. Schools don't want you to know this, and you need to tell the schools this, okay? And this is no different to the workplace. Reasonable adjustments, enshrined in something, is actually part of law. So it's not about you deserve an individual education plan or working plan. No, that's just an optional thing if you want to be a really great school or employer, right? But what you do need to do is if you're going to hire someone who is disclosed they are an autistic person, right, that is a medically diagnosed neurodevelopmental disability by legal standards, that they are required to receive reasonable adjustments at school and at work to fulfill their role. Now, of course, this is, I might as well have just settled that in Chinese, right? No employers know that, care about that. They do. And by the way, I could talk to discrimination lawyers, and I have, by the way. They themselves will tell you, look, I'm really sorry to say this to you, but I practice this, and the system is not built to help the disabled, discriminated win. Like, we can go to court or we can do these things, but I'm sorry, the system will not protect you. It's there in writing, but the courts won't protect you. So, and that's from practicing people. And this is the issue. So reasonable adjustments, let's get to this question, and we can just talk about all these issues. So this is from Eve Holly. What accommodations are reasonable in the workplace for autistic people? We're talking about the issues that Holly has, which is, regulating tone, volume, cadence, speed of speaking, and, poor theory of mind, slow processing speeds. Well, they're not slow processing speeds. They're autistic processing speeds. Needing a lot of help at work. What can I reasonably expect? And in broader terms, adjustments that are reasonable in the workplace for autistic people. This is a great topic to dive into. Yeah,
it's a fantastic topic. And I think one of the first things I want to latch on to before directly answering the question, I'm an academic, I have to make everything complicated, is what you said before, Orion, about all of the systemic formal resolution pathways that are available, legally, legislatively, because I think this is really important for autistic people to know, and also very important for employers to know. There is often an assumption amongst an employer, right, where an autistic person becomes a problem, they're not a good cultural fit, and we need to have them leave. And so they will start trying to create a paper trail that person's been dishonest, that they're incompetent. Every little mistake gets documented in writing and gets blown up into a much bigger deal than it actually would be in a psychologically safe workplace where you could bring your concern to your boss, workshop it, it's a learning opportunity, and so forth. Neurotypical employees are often getting those opportunities, but neurodivergent employees, it's just evidence that you're too impaired to be in that workplace, right? So they'll start creating a paper trail, and they'll assume that once that paper trail is big enough, they can take it through their formal pathway via HR. Now, HR is often there to protect the institution. It's going to act in the interest of the institution to ensure the institution is not breaking any laws and so forth. So oftentimes there's an assumption on behalf of the employer, if I create my paper trail and I make sure I document everything, I'll just shuffle this off to HR. They'll take it from there. And if I need to get rid of this employee, it won't be a problem. What they don't understand is that HR is not the body that investigates claims related to discrimination. Who investigates claims related to discrimination? The Human Rights Commission. In Australia, it's the Human Rights Commission. Overseas, it can be the Equal Opportunity space. There are bodies that are there specifically to enforce your human rights. And oftentimes what happens, and I've seen this as a consultant, I've seen this professionally advising organizations where things like this have happened, they feel like it just went from 0 to 60 so quickly. Like, there were a couple little, bubbles along the way where things weren't going well, but like all of a sudden they just took it right to the Human Rights Commission. Well, that's not usually what's happened. It's usually been a series of profound misunderstandings about what an employer's legal obligations are to this individual, and ignorance about how the processes work. That assumption that HR will just come in and fix it. Once it gets out of your hands institutionally, once it is in the Human Rights Commission, HR is out of control. You no longer have control over this. And I think if people understood that, they would probably change their behavior, because sometimes the things that people will put in writing from their institutional, organizational email addresses are not reflective of people that are well-versed in disability policy and legislation. And I think that really needs to change.
And look, one of the key barriers we'll talk about this question for more specifically now. But one of the key barriers to reasonable adjustments. So number one, you must acknowledge, I'm sorry, but it's just factual that not just the employee, but the employer must agree to the reasonable adjustments. Okay. So that's a barrier, because number one, you've got to tell them what you think will help you thrive in your role. And number two, they've got to agree to those things. And then number three, they'll definitely try not to do this. But number three, you want to put it in writing. Right? They want to have a document. They don't want a document. There's no document that they want, but they have to be agreed upon. So whether you're a parent of a child, like me, or you're an employee, don't ever kind of fight or, be aggressive in a way where it's like, this is what I need, give it to me. It's like you need to be able to, work in good faith. So, reasonable adjustments are something that are enshrined in law with regards to, you're entitled to them. And the issue here is going about them, which very much is, what the questions is asking, because isn't it funny how they talked about what accommodations are reasonable? And, reasonable adjustments can seem so unreasonable to some people, yet they're so reasonable to us, right?
Yeah, well, but to prove that an adjustment is reasonable is a lot easier than people often think. So with a lot of the reasonable adjustments that are recommended, and there's actually a fantastic website to directly answer the question, finally. There's actually a great website, ADCET, ADCET. It's an Australian website, but it actually breaks down the reasonable adjustments by neurotype, the common reasonable adjustments that are considered reasonable. What is considered reasonable and what is not? It can't produce an unjustified cost to your employer. So like your employer is required to make some adjustments, but if your reasonable adjustment is going to bankrupt them, that's probably not reasonable because the cost is just not justified. But what is reasonable is often more, how would I say this? Employers often underestimate what can be classified as reasonable. They'll take this approach of like that cultural fit approach, where if it's not aligned with the culture, it's not reasonable. That's not good enough. Legally, that's not good enough, because what's reasonable is not defined by your existing culture. It's defined by where your culture should be to enhance equity for disability groups. And the really important nuance here is we often think about, and this is where a lot of the misconceptions and misunderstandings come from. We often assume that diversity and inclusion, when it manifests in law, legislation, policy, is about everyone being treated equally. And historically, when we've seen rights-based movements, for women, for people of color, for example, the laws tend to be focused on equal treatment. Women have the right not only to be nurses, but doctors too, just like men, right? We want everyone treated equally. Disability law is very unique because it is not about everyone being treated equally. It is about everyone being treated equitably. Equity meaning it is equitable, it is fair, it is just, it is balanced. Because if our privileged standard is what everyone needs to be treated as in the disability space, what we're saying is, for example, the most crude example would be this government building does not have stairs. If you cannot climb stairs, guess you can't come in and vote. That's not equity, that's equality. Everyone's being treated by the same standard, but the same standard is that abled neurotypical standard of you need to be able to physically climb the stairs. That is not equity. That is equality. Equity is when we have a ramp so that people who can't climb stairs can still get into the building and vote. That's a reasonable adjustment for them to access that building. A very common reasonable adjustment are glasses. We don't even tend to think of very mild vision impairment as a disability anymore because people can just go get a set of glasses. I'm wearing contact lenses right now. And many people use this as a reasonable adjustment. Now imagine if you wear glasses and you are told, glasses are not aligned with our workplace culture. This isn't the image we're trying to create. So if you don't fit into this, you can either not wear your glasses at work, meaning you're not going to be able to see the screen. You're not going to be able to do your work because it will be physically impossible. Or you can find a workplace that is happy to have your glasses present. That's what we're dealing with here. We need equity. I can wear my glasses so I can see as well as you and work as well as you, not equality. You don't wear glasses, therefore I can't either.
So an example of, I've got a kid at school, right? So parents will get agitated because my son might be able to, say, take stimming tools or toys to school and their child who's neurotypical doesn't. And they say, well, that's not fair, right? It's not fair that my child would get reasonable adjustments where he can do this or do that or not do this or not do that, but my child has to. And then they'll actually complain about that. And that's an example of where they're arguing equality, not equity, where what I'm arguing is, if my son's short and we give him a stool and your son's tall, he doesn't need a stool. Exactly. He can see. He's tall. My son needs the stool to get up to the similar height to your son. Don't say, well, then my son gets a stool too. That's just bloody stupid. Like that is equality, but it doesn't have any relevance in this space. It doesn't make any sense. And I can't tell you that it really is one of the banes of my existence when parents get so huffy-puffy about their neurotypical children not being able to do or be a part of the same things that, say, my autistic child does. Like I'm doing it for pleasure. Like all we're trying to do is use these things to get him even to a baseline where he's able to even remotely maybe learn. Right. And, I think that exact argument you're talking about is rife, certainly with parents of kids at school. So in the workplace, it would be no different. And then you have other employers like workmates, being passive aggressive because they're agitated. They don't get to, have what you have or do what you do when really, they're looking at through the entirely wrong lens.
A lot of people look at reasonable adjustments as an unfair advantage and as special treatment. So I'll give you an example. Suppose you have a hot desking office and a lot of the hot desks are in really overstimulating locations for an autistic person. So a reasonable adjustment might be, I don't want a hot desk. I want a dedicated desk within this space that I can use. And maybe I will choose the desk by the window that doesn't have as much overhead lighting. It's a little bit lighter, it's quieter, it's a bit tucked away. That's going to be my desk. Now, imagine a workplace culture where no one else is allowed to choose their desk. They just have to pick what's there when they show up every day. That autistic person becomes the high maintenance one on the team. Why do you have your own desk? I have seen this play out time and time again with coaching clients, with organizations that I'm supporting. Why do you get special treatment? And then the team will sort of passive aggressively start to turn away from that employee because why would they get that and I don't? It's seen as you want special treatment, you want to be treated differently, you want privileges that we're not getting. And what they're not seeing is this is not about obtaining additional privilege. We're not starting at the same point and I'm now getting more privilege and special treatment than you. We're starting here and I might be able to get up to here. This is not taking something away from you. This is just reducing the gap between us that is disadvantaging me. It is not creating a gap that disadvantages you as it's often perceived.
Exactly. And in the case of like the school's example with me, it's not like my son's getting anywhere close to your child, right? Just because these things that your child deserves. Okay, so we just to finish this last question, I don't think it makes sense for us to provide actual ideas on, what you should actually ask for things like tone and volume and speed of speaking and slow processing. What I think is more important we finish on is talking about the better way to come up with those via the end result, which is what is your goals? Like what should your goals be as an autistic person for reasonable adjustments, right? Do you know what I mean? That way people can put that into practice. Like what's the key? If you were trying to tell an autistic person before you write these adjustments, you actually have to think about what you want out of this. Like what would you tell them?
Yeah, so some of the reasonable adjustments you can be asking for as an autistic person are, first and foremost, a flexible working agreement. If you are in a job that does not require your physical presence, then you have a right to work flexibly. So if you're a surgeon, obviously you're going to need to go into surgery. You can't do that remotely from home. That's not going to be reasonable as an adjustment. If you're in any sort of job that is done on a computer, and that is the vast majority of your work, there is a very good chance you can do that at home. If you were able to work from home during lockdowns, or if your job was one that was moved online during lockdowns, you can probably have a flexible work agreement to do that from home. Working from home can really support executive functioning because it reduces the amount of forward thinking and planning that needs to happen in a given day. You're not going to need to get your bus to work. You're not going to need to wake up at an earlier hour and plan your morning and structure it in such a way that you're not going to be home. You need to remember to bring everything with you. It's a really great reasonable adjustment for executive functioning challenges. It's a really great reasonable adjustment for sensory overstimulation challenges of being physically present in an office space. Other reasonable adjustments include a note taker or a transcriber. So there are lots of great technologies that will do this now. So Otter is one example of that, where you will have a right to have a note taker in a meeting with you so that you can focus on the meeting rather than taking the notes. You can use closed captions if you struggle with auditory processing or you have slower auditory processing speeds, and it might help you to see the words on the screen as opposed to simply hear them. You can ask in a similar vein, another reasonable adjustment is that you can ask for written instructions as opposed to verbal instructions. It's really useful if you have a supportive boss, if you can kind of coach them a little bit that rather than providing with paragraphs of text via an email, can you use numbered steps? I want you to do this, this, this. Justification. Why are you doing each step? It's just a couple of lines. It doesn't take any longer than it would take them to say it in a meeting, but it will help you carry out your work more effectively and with less room for confusion. Other reasonable adjustments, wearing headphones if you're in an open plan office. Like a lot of offices don't like you wearing headphones because it's not cool with the team culture. We want people to be casually socializing in an ad hoc fashion. That doesn't work for a lot of autistic people. It doesn't work for a lot of neurodivergent people. ADHD commonly co-occurs with autism. It can make it really difficult to focus if your attention is being directed to all the sounds around you rather than staying on your work. So those are some of the reasonable adjustments. You can also, if you're a student, you can request additional time with assessments. You can request a private exam room if you need to sit exams so that you're not overstimulated. You can request more time for exams. Now, the purpose of getting these reasonable adjustments, like we said, it's not special treatment. It's not so that you have an unfair advantage over other people. It's so that you can complete your work effectively. And really importantly, part of this is ensuring that not only can you do your work effectively, but can you participate in your workplace without experiencing unnecessary stressors that will increase your level of disability or impairment in that workplace. So if masking is a major stressor for you, for example, a reasonable adjustment might be turning your camera off in meetings, because then you don't have to worry about your facial expressions and sitting still. And that's going to improve your well-being, because there's very strong research showing that masking leads to burnout, headaches, nausea, all sorts of things that are going to make it hard for you to do your job.
This is a heavy topic. I can feel it. I can't believe how heavy this topic is, how much it brings up just talking about it. I feel like people, watching this will have got a lot out of this, but also maybe quite drained.
So I hope this will be a bit of a message of hope. I'm not sure how hopeful it will sound, but as we know, 1 in 5 autistic people has lost a job specifically because they are autistic. And, I want to be really clear. I'm 35. I've had many jobs in my life, so I'm not going to specify which one, but I have lost a job specifically because I'm autistic in the past. It's a really terrible experience. And it can be really pernicious and happen slowly and gradually over time through that sense of not fitting into the culture. So if you've had this experience, you're not alone. It happens to so many of us. And, one of the great things about neurodiversity becoming more prominent is that we're now having a lot of research on how to improve this area. So my own PhD actually theorized best practice principles for neurodiversity inclusion. There were 6 of them, and you can download my thesis for free on my website, which I think Orion will put in the video description. But if you're an employer looking to enhance best practice, that is a great place to start. If you're an autistic person wanting to know what that can look like, what a genuinely inclusive workplace would look like, we actually did a case study where we took a university placement program and tried to make it neuro-inclusive, and we had great results. So if you want to see what a neuro-inclusive workplace looks like and feels like, you can go and read my thesis, and I believe it's chapter 9. So hopefully that will provide a little bit of hope for some people and some thinking blocks to help get them started.